Welcome to Passionate and Practical, the art of dreaming, doing, and serving. I am so excited about today's episode because it is with one of my favorite people, Jan Silvious, who happens to be one of my mentors. She is amazing. She has poured so much into me over the past couple of years since I moved to Chattanooga, and we'll get into that story a little later. But Jan is an author, speaker, life coach. She's written 11 and a half books, and she still travels around the U.S. speaking. She is so fun-spirited and always asks, why not? And I love that about her. So today we're speaking about what a mentor relationship looks like and how we've both grown as we've spent time together. So Jan, thanks so much for being on the show.
Oh, Lexi, I'm so glad to be here. And I just laugh with 11 and a half books. I had forgotten that, it is 11 and a half because that half was only about 60 pages. So it really doesn't count.
Hey, more than I have out there in the world. So I appreciate that 60 pager. So tell us, first and foremost, what are you passionate about?
I am passionate about people being able to fully live their lives, especially women, because I deal primarily with women, but that women would find who they are, and then that they would fully experience everything God has intended them to experience, both as they live their life, but also as they give to others. That would just be the completion of them as they give to others. And I love that. And I want women to know that.
Yep, and that is exactly why I found you and why we're in relationship, because your heartbeat for women is so similar to mine. And when I was doing the research and found you, that was something I was Googling as Christian speaker, author, life coach, Chattanooga. And I was like, well, let's see what comes up. And sure enough, you fit the bill. And I read a little bit about you and I was like, oh, I've got to meet this wonderful woman. And maybe she'll just meet with me for like 20 minutes. She's obviously very busy. And we ended up meeting probably for over an hour. And my favorite thing that you said to me was, when do I get to see you again? And I just thought that was the coolest thing. Not only did you do me this huge favor by just allowing me to pick your brain about your career, you said, when do we do this again? So I love that about you. And you truly do practice what you preach and you live it out and are so encouraging to me as a woman. And I know other people that I've run into around town that have felt the same encouragement from you. So talk about a little bit how you got into ministry. What was kind of the genesis and what got you pulled into serving God through vocational ministry?
Well, Lexi, actually, I have a core belief that I have found to be true, and that is ministry is received, it's not achieved. And so getting into ministry was a receiving from God. It was not anything that I set out to do. I became a Christian at the age of 26. And so I had been churched, but just fully committed at the age of 26. But I wasn't looking for anything to do because I had no idea what I wanted to do or what God wanted me to do. And so I got involved in Bible study at Precept Ministries, and just little by little got my foot in the door. And as I observed Kay Arthur, who's Bible study teacher and now world renowned, then she was a 36-year-old Bible teacher and a good one. And so I saw her doing ministry and I just sort of followed what she did, which was be kind to people, reach out to people, meet them where they are, and give them something to encourage their lives, which was the Bible. And so that's how I got started. Started in the nursery, then worked up through the ranks, so to speak, in the ministry. And I've always laughed and said I couldn't continue there because they didn't want me in bookkeeping, and that was the only job I didn't have. And other than that, everything was full. And so then I went out on my own. And God just opened the door little by little by little for me to speak. It started out, I was Kay's substitute. Now, substituting for Kay was a big deal because she had a class in Atlanta of 1,600 women, and
Wow.
I had never spoken in front of more than maybe 200 at the most, and that was stressful. And so 1,600 was really more than I could even imagine. And yet I have learned through the years, and I learned this from my parents, that just never say no, just go ahead and do it. And even if you've never done it before, do it anyway. And so when she said, I want you to teach that class, I didn't dream of saying no. I just said, sure. Once I got into it, I had to do it for 2 weeks in a row. And it was introducing the Gospel of John to these 1,600 women who were used to excellent Bible study. And I can tell you that I had a velvet blazer that I wore the first week. And after that first week, it was so saturated with perspiration, I just threw it away. I just thought, there's no way. There's no way I'm going to salvage that one. And but those 2 weeks really were I would call them my baptism of fire as I substituted for her. But then one day, and a couple of years later, I was flying to Canada and to an event, and it was as if God tapped me on the shoulder and said, this one is yours. You're not a substitute anymore. And so that was my event. They had called and asked for me. And so then the door just began to open. And it opened and opened. And then finally the big opening was one day I got a call from Women of Faith. And they said, we want you to come speak. And here is the calendar. You pick out the dates you want to come. And so when they did that, that was like a huge door opening, and it hasn't stopped since then. So, and that was all God's doing. I wasn't looking for any of that. And so ministry is received. It's not achieved.
I love that. And I love that you said that you were wearing a velvet coat because you were stylish back then and you're stylish now. Oh. And that is one of the things that I love about you. You haven't thought that, as I get older, I'm just going to check out of looking amazing. I mean, every time I see you, you're dressed head to toe and you look incredible. So sometimes I'm like, man, I need to step my game up when I'm around Jan. But
no, you don't.
But I remember the first meeting that we had, just kind of thinking that that it was more on the achieving side of ministry and just thinking, this is what I want to do. And I remember meeting with you and hearing your story and thinking, well, dang, what do I take from that? Because it's not a checklist that I could just, curate on my own, which meant that I had to wait on God and I had to kind of lean into him for what he had for me, which meant patience. And it meant that I had to, I had to be refined and I had to mature, and it was going to happen in his timing. So I love that you say that, because that is true to your story. And I think it's going to be true to mine too, is that I do believe that God has put this on my heart to do and to serve women in this way. And his timing will kind of make it what it is. And one of the things we were talking about when we were kind of planning this chat was that you wanted me to tell a little bit of my story of how I got to Chattanooga, because
what a story, like.
Yeah. And so the short bit of it is that when I was a senior in college, I had heard about Chattanooga 7 times in 1 week, and I had never heard of it before. So I started praying then, and it was the fall of 2013, and just kind of consistently tried to pray about it, and then graduated in the summer, went to South Africa for a few months. And then I think it was between 4 and 6 days from when I touched down in the U.S. to when I packed my bags and moved to Chattanooga. Pretty much, I don't know what the quote is. It's like a wish in a wishing away or something. I don't know. I am so, and it is inevitable that every episode I try to come up with a quote and I just totally butcher it. So I'm just, going along with every other episode of this show. But, so I just pretty much with $200 to my name, ended up in Chattanooga, got a job, had a place to stay. And within a couple of months, I had a full-time job and was a homeowner and started doing Airbnb, and reached out to Jan during this time and just kind of told her that I felt like God had called me to Chattanooga and I wanted to meet her. And I told her all the things that I loved about it. And her response to my email was that you just made me fall in love with our city. And it was just such a cool connection point because I was just on fire for what was happening in the city. And I saw this as a place that was the buckle of the Bible Belt, but not just a place where people said that they loved Jesus, but they're actually living out the gospel. And I experienced hospitality. People just let their doors fly open for me. Friendship was formed. It was just such an incredible season. And then fast forward a little over a year, I met my husband, and 7 months later we were married. And Jan has been there since the beginning, which is so fun. And one of her things sometimes, and this is one of our questions, but sometimes there's times where Jan says, "Why not?" And then there's other times where she's been willing to kind of call me out and say, I don't think that you're really looking to, I was at the time thinking about, oh, what if I just moved to Australia? I don't know what my purpose is here in Chattanooga. I think that maybe God got it wrong. And I was telling her, hey, Jan, I think that I want to just move to Australia. And she's like, what's in Australia, Lexi? And I said, I don't know, adventure, and I'll figure it out. And she said, no. Well, you're not looking for adventure. You're looking for a home, and you want to be with someone, and you want to be a wife, and you want to be a mother, and I see it in you. And it was kind of one of those moments where someone stuck a mirror in front of me, and instead of just taking what I was saying for face value, you were able to let me know who I was and not let me lose sight of who I was in, even though I was going through a season, I call it my hippie phase. So, I was just young, wild. I was young, wild, and free. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you was, when you coach people, what is your balance of the why not, and they're about to make a crazy decision, and you love them where they're at, versus when it's time to really buckle down and call them out and kind of call them on their crap in a way?
Well, as I coach, basically, I often ask the question, what do you want to do? And I have had some who have been in their hippie phase, and I call them on it when what they want to do and what they are capable of doing really aren't matching up. They are dreaming a dream that doesn't match up with who they are, or who I know them to be, and they're exceeding the speed limit in terms of their journey. And so I just say, well, hey, let's look at this another way. As you know, in coaching, it is not, I'm not telling people what to do, and I'm not telling people how to do it. I'm simply calling out of them what I see in them. And a question I often ask is, what do you bring to the table that nobody else brings? And I don't mean that in an arrogant way. In that question, asking them to be arrogant, I'm asking them to really see who they are, and to really dig deep and say, okay, what has God put in you that you can give, and where can you give it, and that it's different than what anybody else is doing. And that question then often leads to their why not question, because sometimes it just changes the direction of the whole conversation, because they've come in with one idea. But if you really examine who you are, like we did with you, Lexi, when you were headed to Australia, it was like, Lexi, I don't think that's really you at this point. I had gotten to know you well enough that I knew your heart's desire was to be with someone and to settle down and to have a family. And I just knew that Australia was a wild hare. And so a lot of people have wild hares, and that's one reason they talk to a coach who can call what's really true out of them. And that's what I do.
I love that. And it was such a pivotal moment for me because I was fully anticipating the why not when I dropped that one on you. And for you to kind of say, no, that's not really where we're going. And it was such a gracious and accepting way of kind of almost, if I could describe what emotionally happened physically, it would be like you grabbed my shoulders and just turned me the other way and was like, no, you're not going left, you're going right. And it was just in such a loving and gracious way, like I mentioned. And I think that is just what mentoring looks like. And so for me, our relationship has meant a lot to me because I've always felt supported. I've always felt loved by you. And I've always just felt like you have my back, and I never felt like you were against me or that you could be offended by me. And I always felt like I could be 100% myself. And so for me, those are just such valuable parts of our relationship. And I know that it's hard for me to see what I bring to the table, but from your perspective, what is it like as someone older than someone to be the mentor to a young woman like myself? What is it meant to you, and how would you encourage people if they're looking to mentor or they're looking to be mentored?
Well, Lexi, with you, it's easy. That's all I can say. It's easy because, first of all, you were an open book. And you were an open book, willing to share all of your hopes, all of your dreams, all of your deepest thoughts, your longings, willing really to just say, okay, here it is, and here's what I want to do. Here's who I am. This is where I am in life, and this is what I've done. That's a thing that I love about you. You were not just a dreamer. You had done a lot. I met you, and then the next thing I knew, you'd bought a house. And I thought, how did you do that? And but it was just that I saw in you someone who aspired for more, who wanted more, and who was not just going to sit and say, okay, please tell me what to do, and maybe I'll get around to it. You were already running, and it was like just run alongside me and shout out encouragement every now and then. And that's what I saw in you. And so it's easy to mentor someone like you, and to be humbled by that mentoring, because I thought, you have done such impressive things, and every time I turn around, you've done something else. and I click on the computer, and there you are with this, I always call it an odd iPod, but it's a podcast. With this podcast, and I mean, you're just always ahead of the game, and so it's just fun being a mentor, and also being humbled and being encouraged by mentoring someone like you. That's just a joy. But if someone wants to be a mentor or to be mentored, I think you need to find somebody you like. I think that's a key factor. If you don't like the person, and I don't mean that in a spiritual way, we're supposed to love everyone, and we have a love for everyone based on the fact that they're made in the image of God. So of course there's a love and an appreciation, but I just like you. I liked you from the first time I met you. I assume you like me, and
yes.
We like being together.
We do.
We like meeting up. We can go months and it's fine. And then we meet up and we start the chat again. And so it's just, I don't know. I think that's number one. You got to like them. I think the second thing would be, if you are going to mentor someone, you know that you have something you can give. It's not just, okay, we're in an official relationship now, and let's see what's going to happen. I know that I have walked a road that is a road you want to walk.
Yes.
And so because of that, I know I've got something to give you. But I also know, because you are a go-getter, that that I don't have to spell things out for you. That you are in process, and therefore any mentoring I do is while you are in process. It is not okay, Lexi, what do you want to do? Let's come up with an idea. You've already got the ideas.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of let's talk about them. Let's hone them. Let's see what you want to do next and how you could go about it. So mentoring and mentor, I think, depends on liking each other, having something to give, then having something to receive, because your enthusiasm always adds to my sense of adventure. Because I think Lexi is always into something, and you go places and do things, and I mean just around town, that I would think, and why are you there? and you would say, well, and then you always have this great explanation that allows me to look at people your age with a greater understanding, because talking to you broadens my world. I mean, I'm in a basically old retirees world, age-wise, but I am, when I can talk with you and hear your ideas, it expands my vision, and I don't think about where I am age-wise. I think about, oh, the adventure. Yes, great idea. Never dreamed of that. Never thought. Oh, you live where? You do? You have houses? You have more than one house? How did you do that? And it's like, I'm so impressed. And so it works both ways.
I love that. And yeah, I like what you said about liking the person, that it seems like a simple task, but really it's, I had an opportunity a few months back where there was someone that was clearly in a position to mentor, and I was kind of in a position to be mentored. And although I could say we quote unquote liked each other, there wasn't a lot of chemistry when it came to the give and take, and and it just made it very clear, like, if it's difficult, it probably isn't a mentor or a discipleship relationship.
Exactly. That's a key right
it probably needs to come fairly easy. And especially, we are both in seasons where life is busy, and we choose and we prioritize what we fill our calendar with. And because there's no payment involved in mentoring, it's got to be something that works for both parties. So I love that. So I love that you call your half book, you say, I've written 11 and a half books. So tell us a little bit about your writing career and kind of how that got started. It's a lot of wisdom that you've written on pages and pages, and for people to learn from and just apply some very practical and biblical principles to their life. So where did the ideas come from, and how did the process look like for you to kind of write those first couple books?
Well, the first book actually was the half book, in that it was 60 pages on understanding women, a book for men. And I wrote that little book based on a pamphlet I had written. I was doing a radio program with another person. And so I had to write a product for the giveaway for that radio program. It was a national program. And so I wrote the book. I wrote the pamphlet. And then somebody, again, this is ministries received, it's not achieved. Somebody came to me from a publisher who had read that little pamphlet, and he said, would you expand this and write a book? And I'd never written a book before, but true to what my parents had taught me, I said, sure, I can write a book. And so I wrote Understanding Women, a book for men. And that was the first book. It was 60 pages. It was published by Zondervan. And when Zondervan, once the door is open with a publisher, if you are writing books, once the door is open with a publisher, and you are considered a published author, even though it is half a book, you're pretty much in. And so that began the freedom to write because I was in with publishers. Now that was a long time ago, and so things are much tighter now in terms of publishing because of the internet, and it's harder to publish a book. But again, ministry is received, it's not achieved. God knows about the internet, and God knows how he wants to get his information out to his people. And so for me and my time, it was through books. And so I then wrote a book called Please Don't Say You Need Me, Biblical Answers for Codependency. And that was before codependency was cool. And in fact, I had used the term emotional dependency in the book, and the publisher, who happened to be Zondervan, said, why don't you use this new term? It's called codependency. And I said, sure, why not? I had no idea what it really meant, but I assumed it had something to do with emotional dependency. And so they said, now this is not about addictions. This is not about to drugs or alcohol. This is about addiction to people. And I said, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. That's emotional dependency. So then that opened the door to more books, and most of my books, all the rest of the, now that would be 10 that would be left that I would write, all except one, which is a devotional book. The rest of them were all about emotions, relationships, and perspective on life. Because if your relationships are emotionally healthy and your worldview or your view of life, your perspective is healthy, then you're going to have a pretty healthy life. And so that has been my goal, to help people have a healthy life. So that's how I wrote the books.
I love that. And I think that you're spot on with just this goal of having a healthy life. And that's another thing that we have in common. And as I hear you talk, it's just reminding me of why I just glean so much from you. And I don't think that I'm fully going to know exactly all of the ways that you touched my life until it kind of resurfaces. Like now, as I hear you talk, I'm like, oh my goodness, another thing that I care about is healthy relationships and people living their healthiest life. And I talk sometimes on Instagram and Facebook about healthy finances or healthy lifestyle and healthy relationships. And I want to be someone that people look to when they're looking to have meaningful conversations. I'm not afraid of conflict. And what does it look like to, help people through walking through tough conversations, whether it be with their friends or their family members and things like that. And I think that you've just done a fantastic job of doing that. So when you're presented with a person, maybe that is looking to be in a relationship with you, there's a couple of options, right? So there's friendship, there's mentoring or discipleship, there's pointing them towards the life coaching aspect of what you do, or it's turning them away and saying, you actually need a counselor or you need to see a therapist. Right. So how have you navigated kind of making sure that different people go in the right category, let's say?
In the right spot?
Yeah.
That's, again, that falls into the arena of ministries received, it's not achieved, because I can pretty well tell when I meet with people, first of all, it's how they seek me out. If they seek me out as a life coach, then, of course, my first job is to determine whether this is somebody who wants to go forward or this is somebody who needs to deal with their past because they haven't dealt with it yet. So they need somebody besides me. I don't dig in the past. I make the assumption of emotional and mental health when I get somebody in coaching. And so if there are unresolved issues that are truly deep-seated unresolved issues that can't be resolved with forgiveness or something that's just a true just biblical principle, but they really need to dig around in their past, then I hand them off to a really excellent counselor I have worked with here in town, and he's just tops. And so I know if I hand them off to him, actually I have a couple that I worked with that are just excellent, and so I do that. And then if they are interested in going forward with coaching, I usually work with them, and I work with them on the basis, if you're working in coaching, it all depends on the person being coached. They're called the PBC, the person being coached, because if they want to come back, fine. If they don't want to come back, fine. If they want to set up for a package of 4 or 6 sessions in the future, fine. It all depends on them and what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find that really with coaching, it is pretty well determined by the person being coached. I have a lot of people I see one time, and I have some people that I have seen for months, and then I have some people that I see for 4 times, and they're good. And so it just depends on what they're coming to coaching for. And then to determine friendship, that usually starts out with there's not really a desire for anything but just friendship. And again, that's received, it's not achieved. I don't go looking for friends. You don't go looking for friends. Friends just show up, and there's this quote that I got when I was doing one of my books, and I've always remembered it. And it's like when one person meets another and they say, "You too?" And so it's like, oh yeah. And so we get each other. It's like when you came into my office, because I consider you a friend more than a mentee. But when you came into my office, I thought, oh, you too. It's like, yeah, you had the same passion. I mean, we're 50 years apart, but you had the same passion. You had the same desires. You were, and also you had the wherewithal to find me. And it was like, to go through all of that, I would say, yeah, God brought you, because it was just and then we clicked from that point on. Then I said, yeah, well, when can we meet again? To me, that's the development of friendship. And again, it's received, it's not achieved. You don't go, I mean, I have had periods in my life where I've been, especially when I was in college, I transferred colleges. And when I got to the second college, I was just lonely, had no friends there, knew nobody. And so I went looking for friends. And it was the greatest energy stressor to try to look for friends rather than to just relax and let God bring them, which he ultimately did. But in my first 2 or 3 months, boy, I was going to find friends. And I don't think you can do it that way. I think you just have this little nudge, and then it's like, oh yeah, we're friends. So that's the way I would consider that. Now, I think friendship and mentoring can go together, because obviously there's a 50-year age difference between us. And so naturally I'm going to know stuff you don't know. But as I said earlier, you know stuff I don't know. And so it's a two-way street.
I really appreciate that perspective, and I would say that you're one of my friends too, so I'm glad that it's mutual.
I'm so happy.
And I just love the perspective on coaching, and is something that I hope to do eventually, and just to be able to sit with people and talk about the future. What are their hopes? What are their dreams? What are their desires? And more importantly, how are they going to serve the kingdom of God? Because I think in today's day and age, there's a lot of kind of this I don't know what it's called. Basically, people are claiming to be self-made, and they are aspiring leaders or entrepreneurs or just people that are successful, and they're giving all the glory to themselves. And
Right.
I really, really want to be part of, in this podcast and in this culture, saying everything that we've been given, sure, our passions, our interests, our gifts, all of that is glory to God, and He is going to use it the way He wants to use it. And that is so much less pressure on our shoulders to figure it out. We've got to be obedient. We've got to be present. We've got to be seeking opportunity and say yes to the things that that we may not even have the capability to do yet, but because that's the right thing to do, is to learn as we go and sometimes get baptized by fire. I just love that perspective. And I
Yeah.
think that's the difference between people that are making a difference and people that are kind of waiting for it to hit them in the face. And sometimes with Christianity and a relationship with the Lord, it is a delicate balance. Sometimes I've found myself more in the waiting phase and not knowing when to jump in. And then sometimes I've been like Peter, where Jesus is like halfway through the sentence and Peter's like 2 miles down the road. Like, I gotcha.
Exactly.
I'm doing exactly what you want me to do, Jesus. And he's like, Peter, come back. We need to have a chat. So
Right.
I find myself in both arenas sometimes. And that's part of me having a very extreme personality. I don't do anything with 50% of me, as you know. I do
Right.
things wholeheartedly. And so, so how has your writing supported your career in coaching and speaking? And how do they kind of all form this, career and ecosystem of what Jan Silvious stands for?
Well, first of all, I can certainly testify that what you have said about yourself is true, that you are full board ahead. I mean, it's like you're just going ahead and you're going to do it. But the thing is, Lexi, whatever you do with great enthusiasm. And I think that is a great asset to have. If you're going to do something, be enthusiastic about it. And I think that your question about how the books have supported what I have done, or what I have done has supported the books, it's kind of a mutual thing. It's because I'm enthusiastic as well about women doing well. My best book in terms of supporting what I do and have done is Foolproofing Your Life. That's FOOL, Foolproofing Your Life. And that is wisdom for dealing with your most difficult relationships. And I learned that when I worked with a counselor in his office. I worked with him, for him, whatever, for 7 years. And this was before you had to be licensed. And so I was actually seeing people under his tutelage, because you were allowed to see people if you had a sponsoring clinical counselor. So he was PhD level psychologist. And so he taught me things that I needed to know. And one of the things I learned was that I would be sitting in the office and I would have two people come in, and there would be one who would say, I don't have a problem. I'm good. I don't know what her problem is. And it was usually her, although sometimes it was him. I don't know what their problem is. I have no problem. And the other person would just be absolutely in agony, saying, something has to happen. Something has to give. We have so much stress in our relationship. And I began to see that there were patterns in people. And as I would work with them, the patterns would be pretty, I mean, they were pretty clear. One of them would be, one of the people in the relationship would think they knew everything. And so it would just be a given. That person knew everything. Second thing I would see was that person was angry. The one who thought they knew everything was angry, and it would come out in very subtle passive aggressive ways, or it would be actually raging. And then the other pattern I saw was that they trusted in their own hearts. They might thump the Bible, because we are on the buckle of the Bible belt. And so there are Bible thumpers among us. And so I would see that, and I would think, God, this is such a pattern. And, I would pray about it, and I'd think, I don't know, I understand this, but I don't understand how your word then deals with it. And so he said, have you read Proverbs lately? And so I began to study Proverbs, and I saw this pattern in Proverbs, same pattern I was seeing in my office. So from that pattern in Proverbs, which is always think they're right, use anger to control, trust in their own hearts, that pattern emerged as this is the fool. And it's the biblical fool. And so that's how I wrote Foolproofing Your Life. Now, all that to say, Foolproofing has been the major support from the time it came out, and it's been out since, 96. So, 96. So, however long ago that was, it has been out, and as it has been out, from that, God has then again, ministries received, it's not achieved, sent people to me for all these years. And that has been I would say, the primary medal of my life, because that has been what has had the greatest influence. It has been the most successful, and it is still today what fuels my coaching profession.
That's phenomenal. I love.
And it comes from all over. I mean, because when coaching, I do it on FaceTime, and I do it on Skype, and so I have people from the West, the North, the East, and people I don't know. And I had one guy, and I thought this was so interesting. He wanted to, he was not coming from foolproofing, but ultimately it would come to that. But he just looked up the word perspective online. And when he looked up perspective, it took him to one of my books, which was called Look at It This Way. He texted me, he emailed me, and he wanted to set up an appointment. And he was not Christian. I'm Christian. He was Jewish, and he was from another state. And we had the most exciting, I would say, meaningful season of coaching of probably anybody I've worked with. And it all came through a book I had written. He looked up the word, took the internet, took him to the book. He got the book. He read it. He called, or he got in touch, and then we coached from there. And I know it changed his life, and it definitely changed mine just working with him. And so, again, ministry is received, it's not achieved. So how did the book support me? They support what I do in coaching. And then the last thing, Lexi, is that when I write a book, usually I have taught it before I write it. And so that's speaking at conferences. I would teach it, see how people responded, then I would write the book. So that's how it all works together.
Interesting, because for me, I've, as you know, I'm an aspiring speaker, and
yes,
for me, I've run into this issue of, well, what do you speak about? And I talk about some topics that I like to speak about, but I've almost found that I'm kind of fighting this. Maybe it's the wrong voice, or maybe it's just, I don't know, a combination of wisdom, or who knows, but I kind of feel like in order to be taken seriously as a speaker, I have to have a book or something, or I have to be the CEO of a large company, or whatever the case may be. And so I've kind of battled with speaking, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is it a book first and then speaking? Is it speaking and then the book? Is it coaching? And then, like what all comes
Right.
first? And I think that God will reveal that in due time. And that's part of the whole podcast thing, is just kind of getting my feet wet in, even though it's not all of my content, I've just learned so much through this process of all of the people I've interviewed. And it's been such a fun way to engage with other leaders and people that I admire and look up to. And so, yeah, it's really interesting that you say that, that some of the speaking or some of the books have been made by some of the topics of which you're like, wow, these people really clung to this and they needed more afterwards. And so
exactly. And as you speak it, more comes to you. It's like you can be speaking kind of from an outline, but more comes to you. The other thing I would encourage you with, and anybody else who's who might be listening, who might want to write, and that's it. I was a generalist for a lot of years. I could speak on anything. People would ask me to come and speak, and they would tell me what they wanted me to speak on. And I would kind of go along with them. And, they'd say, our topic is, and then I would come up with the messages around that. But then once I wrote Foolproofing, it occurred to me that I am not a generalist. I'm a specialist. And being a specialist, I look back over all of my books from beginning to end, and the message is pretty much the same, which is relationship matters, and how you deal in relationship matters, how you think matters. And if you are in a difficult relationship, it will destroy you. And so you must deal with it. That became the thrust of everything I spoke on. No longer was I a generalist about, they would just give me a Bible verse. And, I could speak about forgiveness because that's part of what I do.
Right.
But I wouldn't do a whole message on forgiveness, because it would all come back to, why do you have to forgive? Because there's trouble in the relationship. So don't be a generalist. That's all I can tell people. Be a specialist, so that when people think about you, Lexi, when people think about you, I can even tell you that you are a specialist when it comes to quality living. And when it comes to quality, and to me, quality means health. And so the way that you go about things is to always bring health to the situation. I think the way that you do the houses that you do, that you all have, it's like, okay, there's health in that because you're investing, and that brings forth good things. And so you are if not a healer, you're a health bringer, for want of a better word. And I think that people can look to you, look to what you say, and know that you are always looking for a healthier way to do relationships, a healthier way to physically live, a healthier way to invest, a healthier way, and you do it with enthusiasm. So it's all about living in a healthy way and having healthy family. And I don't just mean physically, but just in every way. And that's your goal. And you're passionate about it, and you do it well.
Thank you. It's been a really interesting ride, because sometimes I do feel like a little bit of a generalist, like you were describing, where if someone came to me with a topic, I would just be able to probably come up with at least 20 minutes to an hour on that topic, because I have a lot of opinions, right? So of course I can talk about that. But I have learned, specifically, just over the past week, the last time we sat down over lunch, and then also another conversation that I had recently, we talked about, okay, Lexi, you have this thing going on, and what does it look like to focus in? And it's tough conversation, because it's asking the hard thing of what is what is my brand? And sometimes it's
Mm-hmm.
just easy to kind of cop out and say, well, I'm everything to every person, but we know that that's not a flourishing brand if they think that they are everything to every person.
Right.
And it's also not a niche market where someone could, look for something specific on the internet and then stumble across you. So I've been, I've just been kind of, thinking and praying on those very things. And I watched some of my old videos the other day, and it was so incredible because I, in this talk that I gave, which is the very talk that I met my husband at, which was
Oh, wow.
Pachakacha, I was
Right.
listening to it, and I was just like, I just want to see what, I talked about 3 years ago. And it was one
Right.
of my first speaking engagements or in a crowd of 200. And I said the very thing that I end every podcast with, and it was so cool. My eyes just got so big. I've been preaching this for a long time, and it's that everyone is infinitely valuable, and they have a unique set of gifts, skills, and talents created by God for His glory and His purpose. And it was just so
Oh,
cool.
wow.
It was
Yeah.
so cool that I did not intend to necessarily close my podcast that way every week, and it kind of just
Mm-hmm.
naturally happened. And then to
Right.
see 3 years ago, this is not just my new marketing strategy, it was something that's been true all along. And so that's really encouraging what you say about health, and that's exactly what that is just saying,
Yeah,
I
that's how
believe
it's
in you.
been.
I
Right.
believe that you were, created in the image of God, and you have a purpose. And so many people, so many women struggle. What is my purpose? What
Right.
am I good at? Why am I on earth? And that's why there's millions of copies sold of Purpose Driven Life by Rick Warren, because
Exactly.
everyone is asking, what is my purpose? And so I just want to help women that are in that season to dive in, to figure out what it is that makes them come alive. And I talked yesterday, and I did a little bonus episode on the podcast, and there was a quote that says, "Don't ask what the world needs. Instead, ask yourself what makes you come alive, and do more of that, because the world needs people who are alive." And so,
Oh, love that. Love that.
yeah, and so it's just kind of this: take a breath of, fresh air, and start your day thinking, instead of what is everyone asking of me, and how am I going to get drained throughout my day? It's like, how can I be alive so that I can ignite this fire? People that are lit up and on fire and have passion, they are attractive to the world. And I think the Christian world specifically needs more of that. There are enough boring Christians out there that are
Exactly.
not doing life well. They kind of hang their head, they're doomsdayers, they believe the
Right.
world is ending, and blah, blah, blah. And for me, I want Christianity to look so awesome, not for the sake of looking like the world, but for the sake of someone looking at me and being like, there is no way she can be this free without something other than herself. And
Exactly.
that
That's
is
excellent.
thanks.
Excellent.
And so that's what I want my life to look like. But anyways, that was kind of my verbal processing of kind of this overarching theme through the past week, which is really interesting that you brought that up. So as we kind of move into our close, what is your advice to a young mama who is trying to balance marriage, motherhood, and ministry or a career?
Wow. That is a tough one, because every young mom is different and every child is different. You have a lovely, easygoing, precious child. And every mama doesn't they're all precious, but they're not all easygoing. And, and so it would be different, I think, for every mama. But as I look back over the choices I made, if I had it to do again, I would choose being a mama first, second, and third. And then everything else would fall in place. and when I say that, I think the marital relationship, of course, but I just always saw that as ongoing. I didn't see making any choices there. I just figured we were a team. We were raising this gang of kids, and we were in it together. So that was, we made the most of it. But then when it came to the kids, I think that if there'd been anything I would go back and change, it would just simply be this phrase: pay attention. I feel like that I was caught up in some of my own stuff, and I did not pay as much attention as I could have. Now, by God's grace, they've all turned out okay. And I can honestly say I have asked each of them to forgive me for not paying attention, and they have laughed and said, "Oh, please, Mother." And but still, it was me. I felt the need to say it. So I would say to every young mother, those children are entrusted to you for just a short period of time, and so just make the most of that. They're God's gift. And they're all different, and you will deal with each differently. And then your marital relationship, you need to be a team, and you need to be both members of the team making the most of it. And then the third thing becomes your ministry. And there will be seasons when you can't do as much in ministry. You just can't, because your hands are tied. I mean, you've got one child now. Then there'll be two, and then there may be more. And it's like, wait a minute, I need to take a time out. There's nothing wrong with taking a time out. The ministry will still be there. God is still God, and he still has his plans for you. I believe God shows us. If I had been listening, I think I would have been able to see what God had for me, and when I needed to pay attention, when I wasn't paying attention. If that makes sense. But, God just has a way of making it all fall into place when we are just constantly paying attention to him, when we're on a team with our mate, and then within the family, when we know when to come in close and then when to take our hands off. Sometimes some helicopter moms would do well to just take their hands off and go about doing good, because they're paying too much attention. So you can go either way. Totally. And I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm just, I just think God works with us individually. And it depends on your children, and it depends on your mate. If your mate is supportive, that certainly helps.
Absolutely.
If you're having to fight upstream with your mate about your ministry and or your children, then stop and deal with that. Don't just plug ahead thinking, oh, he or she will get used to it. No, not necessarily.
That's fantastic. I love that, because I think that if we have that correct pyramid in our mind of God first, and then our spouse, and then our kids, and then our ministry, I think it'll always flow in a healthy way. And of course, there's going to be seasons where we put emphasis on one over the others, and that doesn't mean that the place of them changes. It just means that we're paying more attention in that area. But as long as we know in our heart of hearts that we're not escaping to our ministry, I've seen a lot of people do that.
Exactly.
In that we are making sure that God is our number one priority, and being fed by the word and biblical community, and being served within the context of doing life alongside one another. Absolutely love that. And that paints a great picture of pay attention. And if you're paying too much attention, then find something else to occupy some of your time. Yeah. And so my last question, which is fun because at the beginning you said you were 26 when you fully dedicated your life to Jesus and said, I'm all in. So my last question is, I'm 26. What would you tell your 26-year-old self about life, the kingdom of heaven, or anything in between?
Oh, wow. That's a great question, Lexi. I think, first of all, I think you are I think you're far wiser and more sophisticated than I was when I was 26. So to see you and to see how you are already all in and already a slave of Jesus. I wasn't in yet. I was kind of a wild child. We were, my husband and I both were just not there yet. And so it took me a while to get there. But what I would say to my 26-year-old self would be, it's going to be a great ride. Enjoy every minute. Because I think that even through the good, the bad, and the ugly that has been part of life. I mean, losing parents, going through kids growing up and finding themselves, having friends that have left, betrayed, that kind of thing. It's good, bad, and ugly. That is life. But in the process, it is a wonderful ride as you are all in with Jesus. Because he promises that all of these things will work together for good for those who love him. And so the point is to love him. If I had known that loving Christ would have been the real ticket to life, I wish I had done it much sooner. I would say to my 26-year-old self, what were you thinking? Because knowing that whatever happens, he's in the midst, he's sovereign, he's in control. I can trust him. He's been with me every step of the way. And now I'm really not totally 50 years. I'm only 74. I'm 48 years down the pike. I can look back and say he's been there every step of the way. And he'll be there till the end. And I can trust him for that. And so I would say to my 26-year-old self, trust him. He's trustworthy. He is everything he says he is. His word is true. Trust him. And ultimately, you're going to see that he is working things together for good. You may not see it as good, but he is working it together. And someday, somehow, it may be after I've left this earth, I'll see the good. And I love that.
Amen. Oh, such a great way to finish our time together. Jan, thank you so much for being on the show. I just cherish every bit of time that I get to chat with you, be with you, and do life alongside of you. So thank you so much for your wisdom, for your encouragement, and for loving Jesus first and foremost.
Oh, thank you, Lexi. And it is always, always my pleasure and my treat to be with you. So let's don't let it be so long next time, okay?
Absolutely. Well, ladies, you are infinitely valuable. You were created with a set of gifts, skills, and talents created by God for his purpose and his glory. Go and be his hands and feet to this broken world. Get it, girl. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. If this message has encouraged you, then please click to subscribe and share with a friend who may be inspired by the message. Also, if you have an event coming up and you're looking for a speaker, click the link below to get in touch with me.